Hi folks, this is Klaus of Top Hydraulics. You have probably searched on YouTube already and found videos on easy fixes to the Volkswagen EOS top for trivial things such as the sunroof sticking, how to make the sunroof work manually and how to lubricate it, also how to lubricate the weather seals on the top, or side flaps getting stuck while the top is moving. We are concentrating on the hydraulic system of the Volkswagen EOS, which is pretty awesome. It is very well done and has only a few downsides to it, which are the location of the pump, where it easily gets soaked in water and corrodes easily, or simply hydraulics leaking. Now, eventually, once the car is 15-20 years old, your hydraulic system will start leaking, and it is something that you will have to tackle. It is simply the cost of owning a modern convertible. Happens in every modern convertible that the hydraulic cylinders will eventually leak, or that the pump eventually wears out, that its seals wear out, that its wearing parts wear out, that its moving parts wear out, and or that it corrodes. All those things Top Hydraulics can fix for you for a fraction of the dealer price, and with much higher quality inside than brand new parts. We have separate videos that explain what exactly we do to the pump or to the hydraulic cylinders. I just want to give you a general idea of what will or can go wrong in the hydraulic system in these cars. They are not made to last forever. However, the EOS system is made to last a long time. It's a good, solidly engineered car. Again, you can have leaks in the hydraulic system that can be from the cylinders. You could at some point in the long run have some hydraulic hoses cracking. Top Hydraulics makes new hoses as well. That is actually a low concern as far as I'm on my list, because the hoses have been very well routed and protected in the EOS. The likelihood, the way I see it, of these cylinders failing, in which order they will fail, is these cylinders are sensitive to heat, meaning the seals in these cylinders all decay with time, but the more heat they are exposed to, the faster they will decay. Now, that makes the smaller cylinders that have smaller seals and that are closer to the surface of the car fail faster. For example, the rear lid frame locking cylinders, they simply are close to the skin of the car, and especially if you have a dark car and the cylinder bakes in the sun, then these rear lid cylinders are the most likely ones to fail first. And the most likely ones to fail last actually are the main lift cylinders. Those are so well hidden inside the car that they don't get that much heat exposure. They will eventually leak first from the bottom, but it's not my prime suspect for the first cylinder to fail in these cars. The other cylinders that will fail next are the rear window or rear frame, side frame member cylinders that lift the rear glass. Those have a little bit more exposure to heat, and obviously, as I said before, all of these cylinders do degrade with time. The general life expectancy on these cylinders should be somewhere between 15 and 20 years. At max 30 if the car has been in a cool climate and extremely well kept. So I hope this encourages you to value your EOS and take measures to fix any leaks that you find, or even do some preventative maintenance. Here we have the 8 hydraulic cylinders for the VW EOS convertible top system, and the pump laid out roughly the way they are laid out in the car. We have the main lift cylinders that lift the top, part number 1Q087163A. That's the same identical cylinder, left side and right side. We have the left and right rear lid hydraulic cylinders that lift the rear lid section. We have the and these are different part numbers for left side and right side. We have the rear lid frame lock hydraulic cylinder. That is the cylinder that locks down the rear trunk lid. Sometimes it's also called the stowage cover or stowage box catch cylinder. Same thing, it latches down the frame that secures the trunk lid module. And we have the rear window frame hydraulic cylinders. Those are the ones that lift the rear glass of your hardtop and also lock the top to the front window A-pillar. And last, they are the same left side and right side. And lastly, we have the hydraulic pump. There's a number of part numbers for this pump. They are all interchangeable. The pump is quite a piece of art. It's pretty much the most powerful pump in its class for modern convertible top pumps. 7-piston design, has lots of valves inside, very well engineered. The only shortcoming is where it's located in the trunk. It easily gets soaked in water and fails based on that. The other shortcoming is common, that is the valves inside will eventually fail, and it is good to have this pump rebuilt. At some point the parts simply fail with time. There are lots of seals inside, of course, the Top Hydraulics upgrades. There are the solenoid valves, a number of moving valves inside, of course, the rotating assembly, the electric motor, reservoir, and so forth. We have a separate video that tells you more about this pump and how to remove it. What I would like to talk about today is what makes the hydraulic cylinders fail. As I said, the pump typically is the first thing that you'll find bad in these cars, but in the long run, the cylinders will fail as well. As once these cars reaches age 15 to 20 years, the seals are not designed to last forever inside these cylinders. Let me pick one up and come a little bit closer to the camera. This here is the rear lid frame lock cylinder, and it doesn't look it, but these cylinders have a total of 7 seals inside, and there's the Teflon rod seal in the front. There's a wiper before the Teflon rod seal. There is a rear gland seal, there's a front gland seal, there are the port seals, there's a piston seal inside, and oddly, typically the first seals to fail are the ones that hold the aluminum components of the cylinder together. Even Volkswagen did not choose the right seal material here. These seals are made of polyurethane that does decay with time, and in particular as a function of time and exposure to heat. Now, these particular cylinders are the closest to the outside skin of the car, so they do get more heat exposure when the car sits in the sun, and that will eventually make these cylinders fail. Typically they will first leak from the bottom where you wouldn't expect it, but you may as well find leaks from the top. What Top Hydraulics does is put in much better seals. We use Viton, which has a practically unlimited shelf life. Of course, it is not unlimited, but in practical terms, something like 50 years is reasonable to expect on these seals, plus our much better rod seals that are more forgiving to unevenness in the shaft that slides through the cylinder, and the other seals that I mentioned. Altogether, you get a product from Top Hydraulics that is much better than a brand new one. It may not be as pretty on the outside, but what matters is what's inside these cylinders, and that's where we shine. We give you a product that is much better than new, should last a lot longer than a brand new one under same circumstances, for a fraction of what the dealer would charge you. So here we are in the trunk of the Volkswagen EOS. Let me pull up the carpeted panel that is above the spare tire, and here you see the hydraulic pump. It is under this gray foam cover. Actually, this car is missing a small bracket that is on top of here that is also easy to remove. So for access to the pump, all we have to do is pull this plastic panel up and then expose the pump inside of this foam housing. To pull the access cover up, we have loosened it already. It only takes pulling up in all directions. Keep in mind that this trim panel is normally tucked under the weather seal, so it will pull out of the weather seal all by itself once you start pulling up on all ends. One of the important things is disconnect the wire for the connector for the interior light here for the trunk illumination. That connector is easily disconnected by pushing two tabs together and simply pulling it out of the light. So here I take out that rear trim panel, and now we are almost at the pump. There is another plastic bracket on here that we can pull up on. It's got two little release panel tabs in the rear. You pull those tabs forward. Now you can push down on this and get it out of the bottom mounting bracket as well. And lastly, we take off the foam cover. Now we finally see this hydraulic pump. So here's what we were after: the manual pressure relief valve on the hydraulic pump. It uses a 6mm Allen wrench, or a Torx T40 will work as well. You want to unscrew this counterclockwise. I'll loosen it up first. Here's a half turn, and I'll give it another half, meaning one and a half. If you were to turn it farther, at about 2 turns, you'll see that it gets harder to loosen it. You don't want to go past that point or you'll damage the valve. So let's bring it back to about 1.5 turns open, and we take it from here. I'll show you how to remove the trim for access to both the main lift cylinders on the left and right side, and to the trunk lid cylinder on the left and right side. I'll show you only on the right side here because it's really the same on both sides. Very basic tools needed only both for the trim removal and for the removal of the cylinders: a Torx T30 screwdriver and medium flat screwdriver, possibly a small flat screwdriver, and luxury would be a trim removal tool. So it's quite simple. We have a few miscellaneous parts to remove. There's one rubber bumper to be pulled up. I've prepped it already and pulled it up. There is one plastic trim piece to be removed. Let me do that first with the Torx T30 here. I've loosened the screw already to speed this up. Just one Torx T30 screw. This trim piece comes off. Next, we unclip the front corner of this carpeted trim panel. Now I've prepped that already in order to show you how it is clipped in, because that's really all you need to see. That piece is clipped around this hinge arm, and you simply release it on the bottom, flip around, pull it back. Then you have 5 rivet style tabs to remove. These rivet style tabs can be pretty rough to tough to remove. They're made of a pretty tough material. What you need to do is actually pull out the front part first, and that will then let the whole rivet come out. If you were to try to pull the whole rivet while it's pushed together, you cannot get it out. You need to first get something like a small screwdriver in between the gap, and you might be cussing this a little bit because these come out not quite as easily as one would wish. And then you can put your trim removal piece in there and pull a little bit harder. Once this rivet is opened, it will pull straight out, and there you have it. If you break them, not the end of the world. They're easy to get in a car part store. So I've already taken 5 trim tabs out. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And with that, we should have everything loose to get access to these cylinders. Let me put my screwdrivers away. Let me put my rivets away and work away on this. Just to wiggle things around. There's this one more trim piece to pull off. And now I have already freed this of the weather stripping, meaning just pulled it out of the weather stripping. Now we'll wiggle this around some more until it frees up everywhere and we can pull it out. Okay, pretty good for not rehearsing it, right? So here's our trim panel out, and we now see the trunk lid cylinder and the main lift cylinder. For access to the main lift cylinder, we need to pull this trim piece off. Let me there's one plastic cap to pull off the trim piece. I've already pulled that. Then once that is pulled off, I can pull the trim piece to the outside, bend it around, push it towards the inside, then pull it up. And here is why it happened that way. First we free up this corner to pull towards the outside, lift up a little bit. That gives us enough room to push this piece off the upper mounting pin of the cylinder. Once this is off the upper mounting pin, we can pull the cover off the cylinder body and it simply slides off the shaft. There we have the main lift cylinder exposed. And next, let's work on the main lift cylinder. I will grab a flat screwdriver. This job is pretty simple. We have an upper mounting pin, a lower mounting pin. On the upper mounting pin, it's a bayonet style. We can put our flat screwdriver in there. This one is a little bit too big, so I'll use a small flat screwdriver, push it in here, and this way I'll come a little bit closer to the camera. I basically open up the clip and pull it straight off the mounting pin. With that, put my clip in a safe place, pull the pin. There we go. The pin is out. I'll remember that this spacer goes on the outside of the pin. Put my pin aside, and now the smart thing to do would be to push the cylinder shaft in. I can only do that after I've released the pressure relief valve on the pump, so I'll skip that for now because I don't want to take up your time with that. But we have another mounting pin on the bottom here. This time I can use a larger screwdriver, same method as you've seen before. And here is the lower bayonet style clip on the lower mounting pin. That pin is just a straight pin. You see there's been a little bit of corrosion inside this trunk, and now we can take out the cylinder, and you see that you have two hoses. It's hose number 14 on the bottom, hose number 13 on the top. On the other side it would be hose number 12 and hose number 11. To get these hoses off, you have to pull out the stainless steel clips that slide in this rail. Retract those clips like a 1/4 inch, and you can pull the hoses out. We actually take the clips out all the way because we are already installing a new hydraulic cylinder from Top Hydraulics, rebuilt already, better than new. I used another little trick. I had a little pick sitting around that has a nice sharp corner. That corner can go exactly between the hydraulic line fitting and the clip here. That allowed me to loosen the clip up, push it up, and pull it out. Don't lose it. And I will loosen the lower clip as well. Let's hope it goes as easily as the other one. Yes, it does. Very nice. There's the other clip out. Now I will get my replacement cylinder and put it straight in there. So here I have my rebuilt cylinder. You can recognize Top Hydraulics rebuilt main lift by the fancy machining done with aluminum inserts and a nice green wiper on top. So anyway, we pull out the hydraulic line. Notice that this one happens to have the O-ring still on the line. We replaced this O-ring anyway with a new one from Top Hydraulics. Typically those O-rings stay stuck in the cylinder, and typically you don't have oozing of fluid the way I'm having it now, because I made the mistake of trying to push the shaft before and created a little bit of pressure in the system. But in any case, we put the hydraulic line, the hydraulic O-ring first on the hydraulic fitting, then push the fitting into the cylinder and fasten our clip again. Next, I'll quickly get a rag to clean up my mess, because I don't want this to smell up the car. And step 2, we take out the other line. Now there is a little bit of fluid dripping out. This time as well the O-ring came out with the hydraulic line fitting. We discard that O-ring and use the new one that's always supplied with the cylinders from Top Hydraulics, and push the fitting into the cylinder straight without kinking the O-ring. Push our hydraulic line clip down to secure the line. Line is secured, and now I'll grab another paper towel just to wipe the excess fluid off the cylinder and off my hand, so I don't get the rest of the car all oily. Next, secure the bottom pin and then the top pin. Let's push the bottom pin in. There we go. We push the clip back on. Clip is in place. Pull out the cylinder shaft. You hear a little bit of gurgling in the pump because we are actually sucking fluid out of the pump reservoir, but at the same time there was air in the cylinder. We're pushing this air into the pump's reservoir, and that is taken care of later simply by refilling the reservoir. So now I line up my hinges and the top of the cylinder. I need to pull out a tad more. Improvising here, I haven't done this before on an EOS. Figured I could just do this on the first shot, and I think that's gonna work out just fine. There we go, the pin is back in, spacer back on, clip back in place, ta-da! Okay, let's replace the trunk lid cylinder. Again, I'll show you only the right side. It's identical on the other side. The thing we have to do is get the circlips off the ball joints here. Actually, we don't take them off all the way, we only dislodge them slightly, and that allows us to pull the cylinder off the ball joint. Then we remove the hoses and replace the cylinder, you'll see. So I'll slide a small to medium flat screwdriver under this clip, and as I start walking this clip off the center of the ball joint, the cylinder already comes off by itself. We put the clip back in place, then do the same thing on the bottom. Walk the clip off center a little bit until it is loose enough to get this cylinder off the lower ball as well. Now we have, see how this is walked off the center, and that already opens up the clip enough to get clearance for the ball joint to slip off the ball. We have hoses number 34 on the bottom, 33 on the top. I call it the shaft end or rod end of the cylinder. Now we use a pick or a small screwdriver, try to get that in the gap between the hydraulic line fitting and the clip here. That allows us to loosen up the clip, take the clip out. Same thing on the other end. This one is a little bit more stubborn because this hydraulic line fitting is shorter. We may have to apply a little trick here. Let's see if we can lever a screwdriver. Yes, we can. That seems to have loosened it up a little bit. Let's try to get into this gap one more time. And there we go. The clip has loosened. I pull it out, put it in a safe place. Got a piece of paper towel ready because there'll be a few drops of fluid coming out. Pull out my first hose and put a new O-ring on. That always comes with a rebuilt cylinder from Top Hydraulics. I may as well put this hose already onto the replacement cylinder, stick it straight in there, put my hydraulic line clip back into place. Come on, let's just go in there. There we go. Push down on it, secure it. Watch out that you don't stab your hand. Then pull out the bottom hose. There we go. And make sure there's not an O-ring stuck on the hose. There's no O-ring on it. We put on the new O-ring and slide the hose straight into the cylinder. Then secure it with a clip that we again push down on. This time I didn't have my hand in the way and couldn't stab it. Good, this hydraulic line is secure, and we simply push this back onto the ball joints. I have to extend the shaft just the tiniest bit to fit, and click, it's in place. And this cylinder has been replaced with a far better than new one. Ta-da! So the trunk lid is open and we want to get access at the latch that is behind these trim panels. Now I have cheated a little bit. I have loosened these trim panels up already because I want to first show you the tabs inside these panels that kind of are the secret to removing them. So let me quickly take these things out and then show you how it's done. We remove this front trim panel and remove this middle trim panel to get access to this locking mechanism that I'll show you later how to unlock it. Now we have two trim pieces here. One is the larger one in the front. The important thing on it to show you is this tab, this hook-shaped tab that goes into a middle retainer in the front here. And the easier way to get the front of this panel unhooked is to push down on it so it gets out of this tab. And keep in mind, if you end up breaking a tab, you can glue it. So don't obsess over it. You might get a little bit frustrated. Patience is key. And remember, if a tab breaks, you can glue it later on with epoxy, and it'll be almost good as new. Not the end of the world if something breaks here. Key is you first push down the front of the larger trim panel so that you can push it forward. That will in turn, oops, I'm turning things wrong here. That will give us just enough room to get the middle piece out of the way. This middle piece, its important feature is this tab under the roof of this, under the middle of it, and the rear tab. The rear tab here locks it into a hole back in this channel, and that does need to be pried up before you can move this piece forward and out of its round bolt-like retainer here. So when the rear gets pried up and pushed forward enough, then this piece comes free, but only after the front piece has been pushed forward enough to even be able to push this thing out of the way. Now, let's just keep the camera running, and you'll edit in there later. I'll put these pieces back in place, and we'll just keep this focused. This guy goes way forward so that this tab hooks in. This is in place. This is the key. Where the rear comes first. Okay, so I push that down, push it forward. Okay. So here are the pieces secured in place, and I push down on the front so that I can get this piece pushed forward enough to have a gap here that allows me to first lever up in the rear, have clearance, and then let me stick a small screwdriver in here as a spacer. Then you see that these two pieces are still connected. That means I need to get my front piece freed up some more, and I might have to stick a screwdriver in between here until there's enough gap to get these guys separated. Front piece is out of the way. Now I can move my rear piece, and now I have access to this lock. Next step is removal of the rear trim piece. It's really straightforward. It has two clips, tabs that you simply pull out straight towards the outside, and you could lever a screwdriver behind the rear here first. You just need to free these up, pull this plastic trim piece towards the outside, and here you see the cylinder exposed. Now this is going to be a two-step process. It's a little bit frustrating in a way. There is a circlip on this rear mounting pin, and the front is a ball joint that's pretty easy to remove. The problem is there's not enough clearance to just pull this cylinder up and off this mounting pin. We actually, when we look very closely, see that this mounting pin is a bolt on the bottom, and that bolt is accessible really only from below. And what that means is we first need to remove this bayonet style clip. That's the same old easy way where we put a flat screwdriver into the round end of the U-shape that spreads out the clip, and then we can just pull it back. With that, we're prepared to close the trunk lid again, flip it backward. If your hydraulic system is leaking and the pump doesn't flip the trunk lid backward anymore, well, then you have to use the method shown in our videos on manual top operation. Otherwise, if things are still good enough, then you can now close the trunk lid and flip it back, and we'll pick it up from there. So we have flipped the rear lid backwards to get access to the bottom of the rear lid frame locking cylinder. What we need to do is first loosen the ball joint in the front. That is the same old method as always. We slide a flat screwdriver under the circlip on this ball joint until it's walked off the ball joint a little bit. There's no need to take the circlip off. At this point we can lever another screwdriver under here and get the ball joint off the ball. Then we unscrew the bottom pin. It's a little bit odd. As you saw before, we removed the securing circlip on the top first. Now we use a 17mm wrench to unscrew this bolt, and we will show you another perspective from here that shows you how to keep moving this cylinder up while you're pulling out the bolt. Meanwhile, let me finish pulling this bolt out. Oops, my ratchet reversed itself. There we go. While I'm pulling this bolt out, I want to make sure that the cylinder keeps getting pushed up so it doesn't get cogged on the pin that is the extension of this bolt. So I turn a few turns, push the cylinder up again, and keep turning here until the pin is out far enough to, oops, there goes my ratchet again. Come on, there we go. Until the pin is out far enough to get the cylinder off this pin. Let's see if it has cleared enough. Yes, it has. Let's see another perspective. After this, first I'll show you how to pull this cylinder out. That's pretty straightforward. You just watch out that you don't cut or damage anything. There, the cylinder's out. So next, the perspective from the side on this bolt, and then I'll show you removal of the hoses and replacing the cylinder. So here's the perspective of the bolt that is a pin at the end. And as we're unscrewing that with our 17mm socket wrench, you see that the cylinder tries to come down with the pin bolt, and we just need to push up on it a little bit. I went a tad too far. It has already started cogging, so I need to go back a bit, push it up. Now back the bolt out. And as we're backing the bolt out, keep pushing up on that cylinder from time to time until it is all the way removed. Well, you can imagine the rest. You do the same thing as you screw the screw pin back in later on. You keep pulling down on the cylinder as you fasten that screw. So I'll fasten the screw again just to demonstrate. Makes sense, right? Note that we kind of switched, that the hoses kind of flipped around up here while we pulled the cylinder out. We want to make sure they go back again the right way. That is, double check when you later on close the top that nothing is pinching these hoses. Meanwhile, we use our good old trick with a pick to go between that hydraulic line fitting and the clip. Loosen that up, and got lucky, this one moved pretty easily. While we're at it, I will retract the cylinder shaft. I should have done that first, just in case you have a slipping tool so it doesn't hit the shaft. Plus, you get some old fluid back into the pump, and we have less fluid to replenish. There goes our second clip. Take both clips out, put them in a safe place, and then, oops, there we go, that was not a safe place. Then remember, the even hose line goes on the blunt end of the cylinder, the odd hose line goes on the top where the shaft comes in and out. I will now get the replacement cylinder ready and hold a rag under it so I don't drip fluid onto the paint of this car. I pull out one hose, and I will try to keep the same tension on this hose. Don't let it rotate, so that ultimately it falls back into the place where it belongs up in the frame. That is, just to clarify, this hose right now wants to untwist. We want to keep it in this direction. Put it on the replacement cylinder. Still try to push the fitting in there straight. Secure the clip. Get my finger out of the way. Yep, there we go. Then pull out the other one. Make sure it does not have an O-ring on it. You don't want to have two O-rings on these fittings. Just one. We slide the new O-ring on the fitting, supplied by Top Hydraulics, with this rebuilt better than new cylinder. Push the fitting straight into the cylinder. Put the clip on. Come on, not easy to do if you don't want to have your head in front of the camera here. So I'll get in front of the camera for a second and just force this pin in. Here we go, the clip is on. I'll pull out the shaft. That will suck some fluid out of the pump right now. Since the cylinder did not have any fluid in it, we're now creating a bit of a vacuum to suck fluid in here. We just wait a few seconds. Each time we pull, the shaft pulls back a little bit less. That makes it easier to install in the end. So now we put the cylinder back in the way it came. First put the cylinder on the pin on the bottom, then we screw the bottom pin in, and we keep pulling down a little bit on the rear of the cylinder so that it does not get cogged on the pin as the pin is being pushed up. There we go, that end looks safe. Now I just extend the shaft a little bit one more time and pop it onto the ball joint. Make sure the ball onto the ball the ball joint needs to be turned just the right way, and I did not prepare it perfectly, so I will first pull it out. Then let's see, since I did not turn this ball joint just perfectly before. Oops. There we go. With a little bit of finagling and not stabbing myself in the face with a screwdriver, it finally went onto the ball joint. You don't want to use force, it should go on there pretty easily. And here we have the cylinder replaced. Ta-da! Removing and replacing the rear window frame hydraulic cylinder, which is the one that lifts the rear glass, also called the roof side member cylinder. To remove and replace this one, you actually need to have the rear glass up, and it gets to be fairly simple from there on. It took us a while to figure this one out, but it's fairly simple. All you need is a small flat screwdriver, Torx T15 driver, and a pick for the hydraulic lines in the end, and we will show you step by step how it's done. Again, you want to have the rear glass up. If your hydraulic system has been malfunctioning, well, then you'll have to use our do-it-yourself videos on manual opening or closing to get the top into this position. We will then remove a little bit of trim on the inside just in order to pull the front mounting pin, and then we will remove this circlip on the ball joint, pull the cylinder out, remove the hoses, replace the cylinder, and you will see all of this in detail now. Here is the rear ball joint of the cylinder. We take our small flat screwdriver, work it under the rear of the clip off on this ball joint, turn the screwdriver a little bit, and while we turn the screwdriver, miraculously the whole ball joint comes off the ball. Next step is go on the inside, remove some trim to remove that front mounting pin. Just to clarify, the cylinder sits behind this aluminum frame in this position with the rail towards the inside of the frame. There's the mounting pin back here that we want to remove. We see the hydraulic line hose is routed around, and we have a few things to get done. One is to remove this trim piece. Now, before we get there, it is helpful to get the tension out of these nylon cords by undoing a Torx T15 bolt in the front of the trunk. We'll show you briefly how that is done. So here's this screw again from another perspective. We have actually pulled the trunk lid back just so that we can get a better video shot of this. And with the Torx T15 bit, we can unscrew this bolt and remove the tension on these strings. Notice that there's a lower clip first, and then there's an upper clip with a screw in it. And once these guys have been removed, we can more easily move the cover trim piece. The rear roof member cloth covering, let's call it that, is now easily moved for access to the roof member locking mechanism. Once the Torx bolt is released so that we have tension out of these nylon straps, it's a little, or cords, it's a little bit easier to flip this trim piece out of the way, the cloth covering. Now we will eventually need to cut 2 zip ties in order to be able to pull the cylinder out. Those are here and here. I may as well cut them now. use my handy dandy flush cutters, but you can also use scissors. You just want to be careful not to cut the hoses, obviously. Then later on you need 2 zip ties to tie these hoses back on. Next step, Torx T15. There are 2 bolts that we want to remove so that this trim piece can come out. 1 bolt right here. Watch out that you don't drop it and lose it. 1 bolt with a washer on it. Put it in a safe place. And 2nd bolt right behind it. Here our trim piece comes down already. And if you wiggle it a little bit, pull on tabs, then eventually it releases in the front. You don't necessarily have to remove the front of this trim piece completely, but it helps. Now what we're after next is removing the rear or front mounting pin that has a circlip on it. Let me show you what this is all about. You've seen it on other cylinders before. The pin goes in here like this. There is the front mounting pin keeping it in place. So what we're trying to do is turn the pin for easy access with a screwdriver through this bottom hole in this top frame, and then we push our screwdriver into the U-shaped end of the clip, turn the screwdriver, and the clip comes out while it's still staying on the screwdriver. Pretty cool. It doesn't go flying. And let me see if I can get this done in the next shot here. My head might get in the way a little bit. Now I have turned this clip into the right location for me to slide the screwdriver into it already. And here we go. Our clip is out. Pretty cool. Now that the clip is out, we pull out the mounting pin. You might have to lever a small flat screwdriver behind here, but ultimately this mounting pin comes out. Now the rear of the cylinder is almost free. We have already removed the ball joint on the other end, so the interesting thing is now you see there is a plastic cable channel that is clipped or slid onto the end of this cylinder, and that channel needs to be removed first. We lever it out forward. In order to get that channel out, we first pull the 2 hoses out of the guides over here, and then we slide a small flat screwdriver under the far end and pull this piece of plastic out. Now that looks easy because we've pulled it out twice before already. So the first time around it was a little bit harder, a little bit tighter, and this should make it pretty clear how it is mounted on the cylinder, meaning this open end here actually goes around the bushing at the end of this cylinder, and that is the tricky part really. It's not tricky, you just need to know how you first push this part out of the way so that it can clear the bushing, then at the same time you push this whole plastic piece forward, and you now have enough clearance to get the cylinder out of the way. Now one more thing, you see that the cylinder is mounted with the rail towards the inside of this aluminum frame. We now have to maneuver, turn the cylinder such that the rail points down. Once that rail is pointed down, we can wiggle the cylinder out backwards and are then clear to remove the hoses. So let me see if I can do this in this position. Yep, here we go. It's easier to do it from the outside now. I'll just get out, turn and wiggle the cylinder a little bit until it pulls out towards the rear all the way. Well, I have to correct myself. Instead of having the rail pointing down, we actually want to rotate the cylinder such that the rail points up, and we make sure that the hoses don't hang up on this corner. At this point, we can pull and wiggle, and the cylinder is out. Next scene, we'll be removing the hydraulic hoses and replacing the cylinder. So here's the cylinder pulled out backwards, and let me show you one more time how this plastic hose guide is fastened. That's the one that you took out earlier before you were able to pull the cylinder back out. Now, as you put the cylinder back in, remember how these hoses are routed. Hose number 24, or on the left side it would be hose number 22, goes at a 180-degree angle inside this plastic guide. And conversely, of course, we have hose number 23 on top of the right side cylinder. On the other side it would be hose number 21. And we'll show you removal of the hoses just on this cylinder for now. The whole thing is the same, just mirror imaged on the other side. Okay, so I've put some paper towels under here because we'll have a few drops of fluid coming out of this hose. Let's take one hose out first, start with the bottom here, and like with all the other cylinders, one nice way to do this is have a little pick going in right behind the hydraulic line fitting. There tends to be a small gap that you can put this pick into and lever the clip loose. Once the clip has been loosened a little bit, it's easy to slide it out. Put it in a safe place. Pull out the hose. You see a few drips of oil coming out. Make sure there is no O-ring left on the hose. The O-ring indeed stayed inside the old cylinder. Now the freshly rebuilt cylinder from Top Hydraulics comes with a new O-ring that we put on the end of this fitting. Then we want to remember to have the orientation of the cylinder the same that it was before, and keep the same tension on this hose so that we don't accidentally rotate these hoses 360 degrees and they coil up oddly while we put the cylinder back in. You noticed me just pushing this fitting straight back into the cylinder. You want to push it in straight. If you get it cocked, then you might be pinching the O-ring. Now, a little bit tricky doing this without having my head in front of the camera here. Put the clip back in, push on it, lower hose is secured on this freshly rebuilt and upgraded cylinder. By the way, take a look at this. See this yellow thing? That's the wiper that Top Hydraulics adds to keep debris out of the cylinder. On top of all the other internal seals, we add a nifty wiper to this to extend the life even longer. So now let's take the upper hose out, number 23 in this case. I take out the clip, put it in a safe place, pull out the hose, try to keep the same orientation on this hose, put my O-ring on, slide the fitting straight into the cylinder. Easy does it, nice and straight. There we go. Put the clip back on. This time it's secured just by pushing with a finger. Sometimes you have to push a little bit with a tool handle. Then we are all ready. We just wipe things off a little bit, including our hands. Put the 180-degree channel piece back in place for the hose. There we go. And push the cylinder back in where the old one came from. So I will continue pushing it in and don't have to show you all the rest of it. We push it back into place, get our pin back into place, get the clip at the end of the pin. Then once the cylinder is in here all the way, you will notice that there is a spring inside the cylinder that makes the shaft come out an extra ½ inch or so. And you actually want to either push the shaft end in while you're pushing it back onto this ball joint, or you could have somebody help you move the rear glass up a little bit, and that will make this ball joint come back. You move the rear glass up exactly to the point where the ball matches up with the ball joint, and you pop that ball joint back on. You are done and have replaced this cylinder. Ta-da!